No further ado, let's get started. Right. Okay. Okay. It says in the Sefer Balamoyer that it's important to have hot food on Shabbos. Why are you supposed to have hot food on Shabbos? It says in the Torah, you're not allowed to make a fire on Shabbos, right? Not make a fire. So there are those who made a mistake, and they decided that the meaning of the words not allowed to light a fire. It means you're not allowed to have a fire burning on Shabbos. The Tzaddukim, who only relied on their own interpretation of Torah, they said the words in the Torah which says you're not allowed to light a fire means you're not allowed to have a fire burning on Shabbos. And therefore, every Shabbos, they sit in every Shabbos they sit in the darkness. They say you're not allowed to have a fire burning. Not only allowed to have a fire burning, but you can't have a candle burning, but you can't have any hot food on Shabbos, according to the Tzaddukim, because you're not allowed the fire can't be burning. According to the Tzaddukim, there's no such thing as a fire burning on Shabbos. That's of course a mistake, and the Tzaddukim, they deny the oral Torah. So in order to prevent a misconception, a person may look like that you believe in their erroneous view of the Torah. There were specifically a mitzvah of hot food on Shabbos. What's the hot food on Shabbos? Which hot food should you have? So everyone has their custom. The Moroccans have their custom, and the Persians have their custom, and Ashkenazi Jews have their custom. Everyone has hot food on Shabbos. It's interesting. I don't know if the story is true or not. The Rebbe didn't have cholent usually. As far as I know, the Rebbe didn't have any cholent at all, ever. But someone asked the Rebbe, how come there doesn't have hot food? So the Rebbe said, isn't tea hot food? Having a tea is also hot food. The idea is not to have specifically cholent. The idea is to have hot food on Shabbos. So if you have tea the next morning, it's also considered having hot food. The point is that to show the faith in the words of the sages that say that a fire could be burning. Of course, everything in the Torah has different layers. Everything in the Torah has deeper meaning. The official reason is because you want to show that we're not tzdukim, but there's certainly everything in the Torah has deeper meaning. So I'm sure I don't know specifically of the inner meaning, but even without going to the inner meaning, it's a mitzvah on Shabbos to enjoy Shabbos, mitzvah to honor Shabbos. So what's better food? Cold food or hot food? Hot food is better food. So it's naturally should have hot food on Shabbos because the mitzvah to enjoy the food of Shabbos. So not just to show that you don't agree with the tzaddukim, but also it's part of Enig Shabbos. You're supposed to enjoy the food of Shabbos. Therefore, it makes sense to have hot food. So how do you keep the food hot? So the word that we're going to learn today is the word Hatmana. There's another subject in the Torah which is called She'iyah. She'iyah means the halacha, which allows you to keep something on the fire on Shabbos at all. And in order to keep something on the fire, there are many conditions. But we're not going to get into that today. Today we're going to talk about Hatmana. Hatmana means literally to hide something. That you're going to make this object completely covered from all sides. And by covering it from all sides, you're going to cause this object to either stay hot or become hotter. And there's a halachic difference between before Shabbos and on Shabbos. Before Shabbos, you're allowed to put something, a pot, and cover it from every side. And as long as it's not going to increase in its, but you're covering it, it's not going to make it hotter. If it's going to retain its heat, it's okay before Shabbos. But you're not allowed to, even before Shabbos, cover something in a way that will increase its heat. You're allowed to cover it in a way that will retain its heat, but not cover it in a way that's going to increase its heat. On Shabbos, not only can you not cover it in a way that's going to increase its heat, you're allowed to cover it in a way that's going to retain its heat. But it has to be called the halachic status of covering it. So before we discuss these two different ways of what that means, increasing heat or retaining heat, what that means halachically, let's first talk about the idea of of covering it in the first place. Covering it means that something touches touches the pot itself. It's not that it's hovering over it. So let's say, for example, you had a pot and you wanted to keep its heat inside the pot on Shabbos. You want to put another pot on top of that pot, a wider pot. So even though it's going to keep the heat inside it, as long as the bigger pot won't be touching the walls of the inner pot, because the inner pot is so much smaller, you'll be allowed to take a big pot and put it on top of the smaller pot. Even though it's retaining its heat, doesn't matter. As long as it's not touching it, it's not called Hatmana. Hatmana is specifically when you're touching the pot. That's number one. Number two, Hatmana means when you are covering the area in the pot that will cause its heat to stay. Where does the heat escape from? Heat escapes mostly from the top of the pot. The sides of the pot don't keep its heat, just the top of the pot does. So on Shabbos, if you wanted to wrap towels around the sides of the pot, that wouldn't be an issue, because the sides of the pot are not where the heat escapes from. The issue on Shabbos would be to put towels on top of the pot, because if you want to put towels on top of the pot, that would cause the heat to stay there, and that would be called Hatmana. You're hiding the pot. You're covering the pot directly with a towel. Doesn't have to be a towel. It could also be you put another pot on top of it. Also, if it's touching the pot, on Shabbos, on top of the pot would be the issue. But on the sides of the pot, there would not be an issue. So that's because on Shabbos the pot is already off the fire. I'm talking about a situation where the pot's off the fire. You follow? The pot's off the fire, and it's not going to increase in heat by you putting a towel on it, because it does. It touches. That would be an issue. It would be an issue. Not just a towel will be an issue, but also another pot. Well, Hashem, you made it. Have a chair.
Can I get some screen time? Hey guys, how's everyone doing? This is the rabbi. This is the man right here. All right.
Thank you. My friend over here is an actor, and he loves Broadway, and he thinks that this is one of the most popular shows on Facebook. Because it has Josh Brenner on it, Okay. I think I'm going ahead of myself. Let's go slowly, because there's so many different details. But that's just a conclusion. What we said just till now is that covering the pot on Shabbos to retain its heat is an issue when you're covering it from the top. Using the lid of the pot to cover the pot is not called covering the pot. But adding something else on top of the pot, like putting towels on top of the pot on Shabbos, is a problem. Why is it a problem? Why did the Chum say now to hide a pot and you want to put something on top of the pot to retain its heat? What's the problem? The problem is, let's say you're going to wake up the next morning on Shabbos. You're going to see the pot is cold. And since you're involved in trying to retain its heat, we're afraid that maybe you're going to boil the pot itself on Shabbos. And therefore, you're not allowed to hide or cover the pot in a way that it will retain its heat, covering the top. The sides not considered covering. Putting another pot on top of it in a way that doesn't touch it, put a huge pot on top of a smaller pot, that's not called covering it. That's not called Hatmana, because it doesn't touch the pot. Okay, before Shabbos, it's prohibited. You're allowed to retain the heat before Shabbos, but you're not allowed to cause the heat to increase. Now, the Gemara discusses many different kinds of things that were used in those days to cause heat to increase. We don't really have, and those things aren't really relevant to us, except for maybe one. The Gemara says that wet tzemer gefen, wet cotton, could cause a pot's heat to increase. The Mishnah Brura says that if it's actually wet, it's not really a problem. What the Gemara is referring to is when the cotton hasn't fully developed yet and it's still in moisture. That's when the cotton can't be used. But regular dry cotton isn't an issue. But regular cotton, even if it's wet, is not an issue. But according to others, if cotton is wet, that would be something that could cause a pot to increase its heat. Therefore, not only can you not put it there on Shabbos, you can't even put the wet cotton on something even before Shabbos. But that's not really the most common example of putting a pot in a state where heat will increase is having a pot on the fire and putting towels on the pot while it's on the fire. Because there's towels on top of the pot and the pot is on top of a fire, So the towel's presence will cause not only will the heat in the pot stay, but also the heat will increase because there's something there that's keeping the heat, the increased heat from the fire to cause the pot to get higher and higher. So that you're not allowed to put towels on the pot before Shabbos. In the morning, Shabbos morning, Friday morning, sorry. If you're putting something there to stay till Shabbos, even on Friday morning, you can't put towels on the pot in a way that in order that the pots should stay that way on Shabbos, unless you put the towels on the top of the pot. And the sides of the pot is a problem. Why the sides of the pot are a problem before Shabbos? The top of the pot is a problem on Shabbos. Because before Shabbos, what are we talking about? We're talking about a pot which is on the fire. And we're talking about the pot to better its cooking. Where does a pot cook from? The pot cooks from the sides of the pot. The walls of the pot is where the heat comes from. Through the fire causes the walls of the pot to heat up and to cook the food inside the pot. And therefore, at making towels around the pot before Shabbos, when the pot's on the fire, is a problem. It's such a problem that even if it's Shabbos morning and you discover that you left towels on the sides of the pot, you take the towels off on Shabbos, you can't keep the towels there. But on Shabbos, we're talking about a pot which is off the fire, and we're talking about the pot retaining its heat. Regarding retaining its heat, not increasing it, retaining its heat, the pot's heat escapes mostly, in language out there, bekif like a flame, double and quadruple more from the top of the pot than the sides of the pot. So we're concerned before Shabbos that you're not allowed to put towels even on the sides of the pot. The top of the pot doesn't matter. Before Shabbos, you're allowed to do Hatmana. You're allowed to hide or cover the pot on the top of the pot, even when it's on top of the fire, with towels to the roof. Cover towels to the roof on the top of the pot, because the only issue is causing the heat of the pot to increase. What causes a pot heat to increase when there's towels on the sides of the pot? But putting towels on top of the pot, 100 towels on top of the pot, that's not a problem because it's not going to cause the pot's heat to increase. It's only a problem to put the towels on the side of the pot. Yeah.
The heat goes up.
The heat goes up from the bottom, and it causes the walls of the pot to get hot, and the walls of the pot are what cook the contents of the pot. So therefore, you're not allowed to cover the sides of the pot to increase the heat in the walls of the pot. The heat escapes from the top of the pot. It comes from the bottom of the pot, and the heat goes upwards, fine. But the cooking happens through the walls of the pot. Yes. So if you want to know, your Zaidi does cover his some of ours, the hot water thing, hot water urn. So he covers hot water urn before Shabbos with a towel because he thinks it makes it hotter, makes it hold the heat better. And I thought it was wrong, but its truth is he's right, because the only problem is from the sides of the pot are a problem. Not before Shabbos, you're allowed to do Hatmana as long as you're not increasing the heat. So putting many times a day. So putting a towel on top of the urn is okay before Shabbos. However, if you wanted to put towels on the sides of the urn, that would be a problem. As long as it covers most of the sides. According to the Alter Rebbe, if it covers most of the sides of the pot, it's a problem. If it covers only some of the sides of the pot, I mean, not less than 50% or less than 51% of the sides of the pot are not covered, then it's okay. According to the Mishnah Brura, it's not so clear his opinion. According to Bais Yosef, those who follow the opinion of the Sephardic Poskim, the Bais Yosef, he says that even the tiniest bit of Hatmana, the tiniest bit of Davar Meisef Hevel is a problem, and he is very machmer. So it doesn't. Huh? Put the urn on him before Shabbos? No, on top of the urn? Yeah. No. On top of the urn before Shabbos, it's okay. No, you got to leave it on Shabbos, the towel, yeah. That's what you grew up. Okay. Now, when it's off the fire, if it's still warm, let's say it can be covered, right? But if it's not, you want to take the pot off the fire and cover the sides on Shabbos.
Let's say you remove the pot from the,
Yeah. Hey.
Can you keep it in place as covered? Keep it warm. That was for the side.
Yeah. You're taking the pot off the fire, and you want to cover the size of the pot once it's off the fire. So yeah, it's not going to increase its heat, but it's not. But 1 second. But if it's Shabbos, on Shabbos, you don't do Hatmana at all. What's up? It's not going to call Hatmana. Yeah, on Shabbos, it's not considered Hatmana. On Shabbos, only considered Hatmana to cover the top of the pot. So to cover the size of the pot on Shabbos will be okay. And before Shabbos, it's okay to cover the top of the pot. On Shabbos, when it's off the fire, it's okay to cover the size of the pot. Yes, Zalman. I just want to point out, I'm not sure what you're asking, but before I forget, I wanted to say, when you say the Hatmana means to cover the pot, to cover most of the sides of the walls of the pot or the top of the pot, there are certain scenarios where you can't make it stick to the pot directly because the pot has a lid. The pot has a handle. The pot has a handle. The pot has a thing to hold on to. So it's, even though it's not going to cover the sides completely in the sides, or that part which you want to cover, you're not able to cover just because it's of that thing sticking out. That's not considered. That's it's still considered you cover the whole pot, even though that the handle or whatever prevents the covering from touching the pot. It's still considered an issue. Hatmana, covering a pot before Shabbos, we said is okay. What about if it's shkia already? What if it's shkia? If it's shkia, you took the soup off the fire and you wanted to wrap up the soup. Shkia is sundown. It's sundown, and before Shabbos it's allowed. Before Shabbos, you're allowed to do Hatmana in a way that the heat will stay but not increase. And on Shabbos you can't do it either. If you put it on top before Shabbos, the heat will increase. So why am I telling you that it's okay? I'm telling you it's okay because the increasing of the heat, that's what I was asking before. The main increasing heat that we're worried about is from the walls of the pot, not from the in general. The pot is having the main increase of the heat is from the walls pot where it cooks from. That's the main issue. Okay, let's say it's sundown already, and in general, most of the time, people cook for Shabbos. Their pots are hot usually. When it comes to sundown, pots are usually hot. And the whole problem that the Chachamim said we're not allowed to do Hatmana on Shabbos, not allowed to cover a pot on Shabbos, is because you may end up putting it into remetz. Remetz means a mixture of coals and ashes, and you might move the coals around in order to increase the heat. That's the reason why you can't do Hatmana on Shabbos, because if you do Hatmana on Shabbos, you might end up putting it into remetz, you might put it back on the fire. But when it's sundown, since the pot's hot anyways, the Chachamim did not make a decree of doing Hatmana right after Shkia. It's before the stars come out, before it gets really dark. At that time, you're still allowed to do Hatmana. Hatmana with covering the Hatmana, meaning you're allowed to cover the taking the pot off the fire, and you are covering the top of the pot. I'll do that before Shabbos. After Shabbos began already, it's sundown. But since it's not, it's called Suffolk Yom Suffolk Laila. It's a doubt whether it's day or it's night. So that moment you're allowed to do Hatmana, to cover the top of the pot. Not to cover the top of the pot still. The size of the pot not an issue at all, even on Shabbos. But here it's right after sundown. You ought to cover still the top of the pot. But the problem is like this. What stage exactly are we talking about? It's sundown. Did you daven Ma'ariv yet? Did not daven Ma'ariv yet? Don't we know that as soon as Shabbos begins, you have to accept your Shabbos upon you? Not only have to accept Shabbos upon you before Shabbos, when Shabbos begins, you have to take Shabbos a few minutes before. There's a mitzvah, there's a biblical commandment called Teisvus Shabbos. You have to accept Shabbos before. And so therefore, just like on Shabbos itself, there is many restrictions that when you accept Shabbos for yourself, who cares if it's Suffolk, if it's a doubt if it's day, a doubt if it's night, you accept upon yourself Shabbos. So there is an interesting distinction the Alter Rebbe makes. Very fascinating distinction. He says, when a lady lights Shabbos candles, her acceptance of Shabbos is different than Tosfos Shabbos. It's true that you have to accept upon yourself Shabbos a few minutes before Shabbos, and you, even though there's something called Shkia Hamitis and Shkia Hanira, it's not going into it now, but technically it's possible that 18 minutes after candlelighting time, it's still not the real Shkia yet. But the Alter Rebbe says that you have to accept Shabbos before the end of the 18 minutes. Naturally, you have to rabbinically. There's a biblical commandment to accept Shabbos a few minutes before the end of the 18 minutes because you have to add extra time from the weekday to Shabbos. But your acceptance of Shabbos for Tosfos Shabbos is not the same as a woman lighting Shabbos candles. The Alter Rebbe says when a woman lights Shabbos candles, she's accepting Itzumi Shel Yom. She's accepting the holiness, the sanctity of the day itself, and therefore she confers upon herself all the stringencies of Shabbos, and therefore there's no leniency to do Hatmana. But when a man accepts Shabbos, he's accepting Tosfos Shabbos. He's accepting something different. It's not called Itzumi Shel Yom. It's not called the essence of the day. It's called his own acceptance in addition of Shabbos. It's not considered the essence of Shabbos. And therefore, for the woman, she's not allowed to do Hatmana, but the man could do Hatmana. Also, let's say you daven with a minyan before Shabbos, like we have an early minyan here. Let's say I daven with the early minyan. The moment you daven with the early minyan, for you it's Shabbos. And it's also just like when a woman lights Shabbos candles, we said that you're accepting the day itself. Also, you daven Ma'ariv early, it's considered like you're accepting the sanctity of the day itself. Which part of davening is it that confers that sanctity upon you? It's not clear what the custom is. There are various opinions brought in Shulchan Aruch, whether it's from Boyikala, whether it's from Baruch Hu. It seems, according to everybody, once you say Baruch Hu, you're stuck. I know it's going to happen to me one day. Mitzvah Shabbos, another thing, very good. Very good. It says the extra neshama comes into you, and you see the words of Freis Aleinu. The different stages of Shabbos, and Freis Aleinu, that's when you're supposed to stand up to the words of Freis Aleinu, because that's when the extra neshama comes into you. That's extra neshama. Doesn't mean the sanctity of the day of Shabbos itself. It could be Shabbos without extra neshama. Sometimes you have extra neshama on Shabbos, and you love to daven and learn, and you're behaving so well. I don't want to talk about you. Fine. But the extra neshama doesn't necessarily mean the sanctity of Shabbos. Sanctity of Shabbos starts earlier. The Mishnah Berurah has a different opinion. Mishnah Berurah says, if you personally daven Ma'ariv, but most people did not daven Ma'ariv, he says it's not considered Itzum Hashem. It's still considered your personal acceptance of Shabbos. And therefore, you could still do Hatmana yourself. Although you daven Ma'ariv, you accepted Shabbos. If the minyan didn't daven yet, it's not considered Itzum Hashem. But according to the Alter Rebbe, if you daven Ma'ariv, you do Shabbos candles, it's not considered just an addition, extra. An addition to Shabbos is considered the sanctity of Shabbos itself. And the difference is, are you allowed to do Hatmana or not? If it's the sanctity of the day itself, you cannot do Hatmana. If it's just your additional of Shabbos, it's a biblical obligation, you are allowed to do Hatmana. You're allowed to take the pot and cover the top of the pot off the fire. Okay. Obviously, you have to be careful that the pot is fully cooked, because you're going to cause the pot to cook on Shabbos. That is this whole discussion we're having about Hatmana, about increasing the heat or retaining the heat. That's a rabbinical concept regarding whether or not you are allowed to do an action that will cause a pot's heat to stay there in the pot. But if you're actually going to cause a food to cook and the food hasn't cooked yet, there's a whole different issue of bishul on Shabbos. So we're talking about a situation where the food is cooked. What about let's say you want to put in your pot, your cholent pot, your crock pot. You have. I just discovered this week. Someone told me, no way they made crock pots. The one who made crock pots made it for cholent. Yeah, Google it now. You find it. Crock pots and cholent. They made it for the sake of cholent. What do you do? I just discovered this. It's very important halacha. You want to take kishke and you want to put it into your cholent. You want to wrap it around and stick it into the cholent. So it's submerged. Your kishke is sort of like its own pot, and it's submerged into this from the sides. And you allowed to do it. You have aluminum foil. It's wrapped around aluminum foil, and it's on inside the cholent, and its heat is going to increase. So if you have a nylon bag or something, it can make holes in it. and then it's okay, because then it's considered. There's first of all, there are those who say it's okay. There are those who say that it's okay to have a bag in the shalom. They say it's not you're doing Hatmana. You have different compartments. Imagine that you have a pot with different sections in the pot. Imagine if there was like actual metal, like triangles in the pot, and it wouldn't be considered Hatmana, just different parts of the pot. It's the way you're cooking. But if you have a kishka and it's submerged into the cholent, some people say it's a regular way of cooking. Others say it's Hatmana. If they say you're doing Hatmana, you're putting an object and you're putting into the something else to keep its heat, and it's submerged from all sides, and it's at Mesa Favel, and it's increasing, it's a problem. And therefore there's a way out of it. What's the way out of it? The way out of it is to make holes in it. Make holes in the bag, whether the bag is holding the bebelach, or it's holding the rice, or it's holding kishka. Make holes in it, so that way it's intermingling with the rest of the pot, and then it's not considered anymore it's not considered anymore atman. It's considered cooking together with the rest of the pot. But putting a tuna fish can, let's say you like this, how you want to have hot tuna, and putting that's certainly be a problem. You're putting a pot inside another pot. The tuna fish can is a separate entity. You can't keep that tuna fish can there in the pot. And I don't know who likes hot tuna, but just in case you did. What about yes, Alman. If the kish wasn't wrapped in aluminum foil, what was it inside? Inside the shalom? We'll talk about mommy later. I don't know if mommy wants to be broadcast on Facebook how she does, but the chayra, in order to put the kishka in the tray, you have to put holes in aluminum foil. Otherwise, it'd be a problem of Hatmana. But you don't have to make a lot of holes. I just want to say one more halacha about really it's important for Sfardim, and that is that according to Bais Bezalel mentioned before, you can't increase, even putting the pot on top of coals is considered Hatmana. It's considered Hatmana whatever makes of hevel. Putting the pot on top of coals is considered Hatmana. What about putting the pot on top of a hot plate? So you put a pot on top of a hot plate, the machlekes between the Rabbi Yosef and the Mordechai Eliyahu, whether or not you let it put a pot on a hot plate or not, it's considered Hatmana because it's touching the hot plate. Rabbi Yosef was one of those who said it's forbidden, but Rabbi Farkash said that he spoke to him. He said his proofs why he thinks it's okay, and he thinks that he was pretty much convincing, and that he thinks that according to all farms should be okay with the kip on top of the coals, but putting on a hot plate is not the same thing, and it's fine. Okay, one more halacha and I'll let you guys go. Okay, let's say you have a baby bottle. You want to heat up the baby bottle on Shabbos. So what do? You put the baby bottle into hot water. So I got to do that on Shabbos. You're causing the baby bottle to heat up. There's milk in the baby bottle. You're putting it into the water, and you're putting it on the sides are completely getting hot. So is that okay? Oh, very good. It's a klisheni. Klisheni means that since when something's on the fire itself, the walls of the pot are hot. When you transfer that liquid or that solid into another pot, its walls are cold. So the walls are going to cause the thing to get colder and colder because its temperature is going to continuously decrease faster because its walls weren't on the fire. So the whole prohibition of Hatmana is only when something was on the original pot that was placed in on the fire. But once it's placed into a second pot, there's no prohibition. That's one reason why it's okay. And also, if you put it into the hot water and the top of it's sticking out, so the chayra, we said before that Hatmana is only when it covers the top on Shabbos, but the sides aren't. It's not considered Hatmana. But more importantly, is what you said, that it's a klisheni. I did tell you that last halacha. I did want to go back. I want to tell one more thing. Let you guys go and say one more thing. Okay. Let's say you want to put something on top of your pot. You're allowed to heat something up on top of a pot on Shabbos. You can't put something on top of the fire. Let's say you want to put challah on top of your pot on Shabbos to heat up the challah. You want to warm up the challah, and you're putting it in a way that's okay. A lot of halachas about when that's okay, when it's not okay, and you want to increase the heat of something. It's very complicated because according to Alter Rebbe, if it's going to cause it going to cause it to get hot, and there's some kind of liquid there, even if it's a liquid that's naturally like chicken, according to Alter Rebbe, putting something on top of the pot which is going to make it hot is an issue. If it's at a distance or won't make it or won't get so hot, then it's fine. But if it's something which doesn't have any liquid like a challah, and you're putting on top of the pot to heat up you're putting the challah on top of the pot to heat up the challah, and it's not going to get too hot. So, but you want to put it in the aluminum foil because you're afraid the challah is going to crumble on the pot or something like that. So so the halacha is you're allowed to put it into the aluminum foil on the condition that you're only doing it for the sake of keeping it intact. But if you're doing it in a way just to because you want to increase its heat, then that would be an issue. Do you know what your intent is? But the problem is there's Hatmana. Doing Hatmana. Hatmana is an issue. You can do Hatmana on Shabbos. So if you're wrapping it in a way that it in order to retain its heat, it's a problem on Shabbos, and therefore you could put aluminum foil there partially, so it just shouldn't spread around, but you can't put it there in a way that it's. It doesn't really matter the percentage over here. It matters your intent. If your intent is just to keep it intact, it's okay. You can't, but once it's intact, you want to wrap it again and you make sure it's fully covered. That's the issue. But if here it's okay. I think any questions I would want to share tonight. But yes.
Yes. As far as adding before Shabbos, they said it's a shalom.
Adding what? Oh, it's Menatera. It's Menatera.
So why do you have it 18 minutes? One shot 18 minutes. Did you say 15 minutes?
So there's no shear exactly of how many minutes you have to add. So just you have to add something. I did see someone write, you know the Kitzur Halacha Shabbos, the blue slorim that came out about in the 80s. Remember those? He mentions over there 4 minutes. He mentions there 4 minutes. I don't think he brings a source, but in general, it doesn't say how many minutes you're supposed to add. That's people say 18 minutes. You have 18 minutes until it's shkia, but you have to add a few more minutes. How many minutes more? I saw a shear 4 minutes, but I don't know where he got it from. That's a wrap. Any other questions? Questions?
So you're not gonna do any on the pot, any towel.
To add towels to a pot on the fire? To add a towel to a pot while it's on the fire? No, on top of the pot we're saying it's okay. On the sides of the pot is a problem. Oh, one more thing, I'll tell you one thing is with the Yevet. If you did wrap the pot up in a way you weren't allowed to, as long as the top, this is an important halacha, which as long as the pot was uncovered, it's okay. Even though I said the main thing is the sides, Farkas said it's a very complicated thing. It took him a whole chapter to explain this, but this is the conclusion. If you wrap the pot up before Shabbos in a way you're not allowed to, as long as you kept the top uncovered, wasn't the lid's there, but it's not covered with Hatmana, with towels, so then you're allowed to eat it still.
Why is that?
He said it's a whole chapter in his book. The logic would be the opposite because the main things are sides, right? So I don't know. I didn't learn the whole chapter of how he gets into it. He scared me when he said it's so complicated in the whole chapter in his book. But maybe I should learn that chapter next week.